Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Apologies that we weren't able to join you yesterday, but we're here today, and today's learning is dedicated in memory of Ami Bas Aryeh, Paul Casimir, Yom Yochid ben Moshe Eliezer, Shlomo Yochid ben Moshe Eliezer, Ben Sion ben Yitzchak, Ari ben Shimon, Leah Bas Faivo, Avram Mordechai ben Moshe Katna, Menashe ben Tzvi Zalman, and Ralia Bas Avram Pinchas. We wish all their families long life. So we're going to discuss today an idea in this week's Torah portion. If I was to ask you what we all want, I would say that what we all want is encompassed in the words that we say every single day in our prayers. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. We ask the Almighty for peace. Sim shalom, we say. Every single time we pray, our thoughts, our heartfelt prayers are all about peace. And peace comes from the word shalom, which is the word for wholesomeness. So I guess the question is, what constitutes peace? How do we achieve peace? And over the last 70 or so years, Israel has tried everything possible to have peace with its neighbors. We've tried to enforce, firm borders and boundaries. They've ceded land in order to have peace. They've invested to try to have peace. And each of the policies that they have chosen and each government has chosen has had varied success. This week's Torah portion, we find Pinchas, my namesake, and we find him in a situation where he has to take some drastic measures. What happens? Well, it follows on from last week's Torah portion, where Bilam had been thwarted in his attempt to curse the Jewish people. It came out as blessings. King Balak wasn't happy with the outcome, and therefore Bilam came up with Plan B. Plan B was that what they should do is that they should ensure that they seduce the men of Israel and the women of Israel, and therefore they will find themselves in a compromising position. And therefore the girls of I think it was Midian, they went out and they seduced the men, and one of them was a prince of Israel, Zimri his name was, and basically he compromised on the values and the morals of our people. And the word got back to the camp of Moshe and to the Jewish people that this was going on, and Moshe was frozen. He didn't take any action at that moment in time. Pinchas moved forward, and with a spear he took drastic action, and he killed on the spot both the Midianite and the prince of Israel. And seeing them on the spear, it immediately stopped the plague that was running rampant through the Jewish people, and that was it. And the Torah portion this week tells us that God gave him the covenant of peace as a reward for his actions. And the obvious question is, this seems absolutely distorted. Why would Pinchas, a man who had committed a violent act, be rewarded with a Nobel Peace Prize? Now, I know what you're saying. We've seen this before. Lahavdil, Yasser Arafat, right? A man who had so much blood on his hands, and yet he received the Nobel Peace Prize. But here we're dealing with the Torah rather than contemporary society. But one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is very often is whether sometimes you can be engaged in ostensibly peaceful means, but it can be passive aggression that one is involved with, and really it's an act of war, right? I'll give you an example. When we had with Neville Chamberlain before the war, that scrap of paper that he came back with, right? The whole thing was a farce. It was a circus, right? The Nazis were never really engaged in making peace, right? And Yasser Arafat, in a similar vein, it wasn't about peace. about, it was about getting land. It was a land grab, and that was just a means to an end. So sometimes diplomacy and having dialogue with opposition, although it may seem as being peaceful, it can actually be aggression that is, as it were, covered with a cosmetic veneer as being peaceful. Conversely, sometimes you may be involved in an act of aggression or physicality that actually its aim is for peace. So take, for example, the 6-Day War or the 1948 war. Those wars were not wars of aggression. They were actually a defense, a reaction, right? A defense and a fight for survival, right? In order that we should be able to exist, because otherwise we would have been pushed into the sea, right? And very often, if you imagine that somebody's being attacked and they fight back, would you say that they are involved in an act of aggression, or would you say that they are actually trying to restore peace? They're trying to thwart the attempt of the attacker, of the aggressor, and they are trying to, as it were, ensure that peace is restored. Pinchas knew that when this occurred, that the whole purpose was to destroy the Jewish people, to destroy the fabric of our nation, that would be the end of the Jewish people. And therefore, these two perpetrators that were guilty and were deemed worthy of being executed, because in Jewish law that is the punishment, he felt it was justified, and the Torah tells us it was justified, in him carrying out this drastic action. Drastic measures are sometimes needed when drastic things are going on around us. And that's point number one. So therefore, very often we have to take a step back and we have to look and see, what purports to be peace, aims of peace or aims of war may not be what they say on the tin. And we have to be a bit more discerning. Sometimes you can have a peaceful demonstration, right? The demonstration that went through Capitol Hill, right? And ended up the question was that a peaceful demonstration? Were their aims peace? I don't think any of us would think that was a peaceful demonstration. That was an incitement to violence. That was, thuggery and bullying and more. So that's point number one. Number two is we understand that he was justified in what he did. But why the Nobel Peace Prize? So we've given one explanation. One explanation was that he was trying to restore peace. And sometimes you need to use violence to restore peace and wholesomeness. But there is another explanation, and that is about Pinchas himself. The Netziv offers the following insight, which is something that very much I keep with me. It's quite startling, but anything that we go through in life has an impact on us. Every action has a reaction. If you ask yourself, who are you? Who are you today? You are the sum total of the actions that you've carried out in your life. Okay? So if I do an action of kindness, I become more kind. If I do an act of aggression, I become more aggressive. And that is one of the most regrettable things that even Golda Meir pointed out. She said she could, what was it, the statement she made? She could forgive the Arabs for many things, but not the fact that we had to fight or we had to kill and we had to defend ourselves. In other words, young boys, young men and women, in the formative years of their lives, they're only 18 years old, and yet it is forced upon them, the most loving and peaceful nation, and yet they are forced to pick up arms to defend their people and their country. And the downside is that inevitably the outcome of those actions, of that experience, impacts and influences and transcends us. So therefore, Pinchas, when he was engaged in a violent act, despite the fact, right, he was killing Cosby and Zimri, right? They were guilty. They were worthy of being killed, right, for the crime that they committed. Nonetheless, The fact is, it had an impact on him. He had, if you carry out an act of violence, you become that little bit more violent. And we see it even in our own society. You know, the games that they play, that the kids play nowadays, Fortnite and the like, you know, COD, right, which are all about killing millions of people on a screen. It has an impact on your mind, on your thoughts, on your feelings. And that is why it is such an imperative for us. And the takeaway from today is to ensure that, you know, if we're, you know, to engage as much as we can in positivity, in kindness, in goodness, in mitzvot, because we become the sum total of our actions. A person's not born good. A person's not born bad, right? It's more nurture than nature. And therefore, if we are willing and if we are able to every day, you know, give that charity, help that person, make that phone call, think about other people, pray, do kindness, and so on and so forth, we will become better people. So with that, we wish everyone a good day. We'll now conclude as we usually do, just to say good morning to our viewers, to Carol, to Peter, to David, to Richard, to Estelle, and to Michael, and all of those that are joining us still. We say the following. Good morning. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Memorial prayer. Adon olamim zacho es nishmois. Ami bas Aryeh Paul Kazmi, Yomi Yochia ben Moshe Eliezer, Shlomo Yochia ben Moshe Eliezer, Ben Sion ben Yitzchak, Ari ben Shimon, Bas Feivel, Avram ben Moshe, Mordechai ben Moshe Katnam, Menashe ben Tzvi Zalman, Ralia bas Avram Pinchas, Shalchur Yolamam, Ana Balarachamim, Dasrim Seita, Kanafavli Kanafechal Yolamim, Vertitz Rob Zachayim, Mrs. Rochaim, Mrs. Nishmasam, Venucha Mishkosam B'Shalom, Venama, Amen. Lastly, for Shlema prayer, before we get ready, right, David? Everyone's getting excited for tonight. Mi Shevech Avasei Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Moshe Aaron David Shlomo Yivach Repes Achelim Bavo Shana Mispalim Bavoram Bez Chazak Kadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachim Yimalei Hemlach Monafasam Vishlach Lem Fushlim Neshmayim Lacholavim Besosh Shach Yisrael Refuas HaNefesh V'Sagov Hashavas Magriv V'Nama Amen. Reminder that today today at lunchtime, yes, thank you, Estelle. Today at lunchtime, we have our lunchtime program at 12, the Shmooze, and we wish a refuah shlema in particular to Polly Davis and to Alan Kite, dear members that are seriously ill. We wish them a refuah shlema b'soch shach chol Yisrael, amongst all the other members of our community and of Israel that are unwell. Anyways, everyone, tomorrow, whatever happens, we will wake up, and I'm sure we will carry on, despite the fact that it may not be the happiest of days for English football. But I'm gonna let's wait to see what happens. But everyone have a good day. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, please God, or at lunchtime.